And my presentation is mostly just going to be an introduction to the foundation, to Misophonia Matters, and let you know what's going to go on in the other presentations. And this is our first Misophonia Matters May conference, and I'm very excited about that. This is something that I do plan to do yearly, so I am quite excited to share this first one. I've wanted to do this for a couple years now, and I had the opportunity. So on to the next slide. And this is just about me, a little few points. I'm Shaylynn Hayes-Raymond. I've been an advocate since 2015. I am now a licensed counselor in Canada. This is very recent. I got my license officially this week, but I've been writing books about misophonia and articles since 2015. I started Misophonia International with Dr. Jennifer Jo Brout in 2015. She's no longer working with Misophonia International, but she is doing lots of work still with the IMRN and is still heavily involved in misophonia. And I have a great respect for Dr. Brout and her work, and I am happy every time we can work together. So, what is the International Misophonia Foundation? The International Misophonia Foundation is dedicated to serving the needs of individuals and families impacted by misophonia through increasing ethical, accurate, and educational resources for researchers, institutions, policymakers, individuals, families impacted by misophonia. And the IMF seeks to increase the development of research that respects the needs and dignity of those suffering with misophonia. I'm not going to read the rest. It's a lot. The lowdown is that we care about research, advocacy, awareness. We are going to be doing our own research. We are starting a research journal. We have an independent review board already set up. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit incorporated in Missouri. So all donations to our organization do get tax receipts if they are a donation to help, keep us running, or a membership or something like that. And this is the official conference schedule. I just wanted to have this up so that people had an idea. And today we have two pre-recordings. One is an interview I did with Dr. Ledoux, and I think that's excellent. I do want to point out that the interview with Dr. Kumar is from 2021. He unfortunately was unable to be here today, but his research is so important that I felt like it was, I want to say, paramount to have him involved in some way. So I did decide that despite this video being from 2021, that the research itself is still very valid, and I really wanted to have it shared. And then after those two presentations, we will have Lucia Lara, who is an occupational therapist. And she will be talking about the importance of play in sensory integration. And she will be presenting live. And tomorrow we have 3 live presentations and then 1 pre-recorded presentation from Lauren Hartgrove of the Misophonia Research Fund. So I think this is going to be a great conference, hopefully. I think we have some great presenters, and I'm very interested myself to hear what our other presenters have to say, because I think these differing perspectives are what we really need to understand such a new disorder. So this is just another photo of all of our presenters who we're going to have, and you will see their lovely faces during their presentations. And these are the IMF board members. We are a board of 6 people. How do I put this? 3 of us are clinicians. 1 of us is a community member with misophonia. 1 focuses on ethics, and then we have our researcher, Dr. Prabhu. So I think we have a great, strong team, and 2 of us have misophonia. 1 is a misophonia researcher, And as I said, the others are clinicians. So I think we have a strong board and we work together very well. And we are all very dedicated in this organization and hopefully presenting research, presenting clinical values, and of course, what everyone wants to know at the end of the day, how do we cope with this disorder? And as someone with the disorder that is at the tip of my tongue at all times, I became an advocate because I have the disorder. I know the impact it has on people's lives. I know how deeply reaching that impact can be. I know that it impacts every single part of your life, whether that's family, school, work, relationships with partners, relationships with your children, even just walking down the street. I understand that this disorder is something that really you cannot get away from. So, this organization is very important to me, both for my own personal reasons and, of course, professionally. So, the IMF does have memberships, and I put a link and a QR code. You also got this PowerPoint in case you want any links in it. And for the first year, we are doing lifetime memberships. So that means that, forever you will have these benefits like half off for some events, discounts for events, special resources. And that will be ending January 2025. And this is just kind of like for our first year, we want to really give the most benefits we can to those who are helping us really get off the ground because we are very thankful for all the support. So, to start, what is misophonia? And I'm sure if you're here, you have a general idea of what misophonia is, but it has been described by Kumar, whose video we will play, as an atypical neurological processing of audio and visual information. Other documents like Brout et al. Say a neurophysiological disorder where otherwise non-aversive stimuli cause a fight, flight, freeze reaction. But as I'm sure you all know, the research is still very new. And it was 2001, so 23 years ago, when Doctors Yastreboff and Yastreboff discovered the phenomena and named it. But there has been some proof that it is real. It's shown with altered brain activity in the auditory cortex and salience network. And Kumar's work proves that there is a brain basis, which includes the sensory motor system. Research has also shown that interoception has been involved, which is our brain's ability to understand our organs and what's going on in our body. So that's a very interesting piece of work. And I included what is sensory processing disorder because sensory processing disorder is something that comes up a lot because there are a lot of symptoms of sensory processing disorder that we have anecdotally seen in people with misophonia. Unfortunately, the research has not shown if they are related. I actually have a draft for a study right now that is going to take the misophonia assessment from Duke and then the sensory processing disorder and sensory integration uh, measure. I forget which measure it is. It's the adult one. And we're going to do both of those in one study and see if the people who score high on misophonia also score high for sensory integration. So the reason I'm saying both sensory processing disorder and sensory integration is because there are kind of two camps in that area. Lucy Miller in the early 2000s renamed sensory integration to sensory processing disorder, and that's sort of the more known name in some circles. But in other circles, such as Winnie Dunn or the Spiral Foundation, sensory integration is still the preferred term. And sensory processing disorder is also very, very complicated, as you can see on this screen. There's under responsivity, over responsivity, things like that. Over responsivity would be where misophonia would fall. because we are over responsive, obviously, to sounds and sometimes visuals. And it is important to note, though, that sensory processing disorder is also not in the DSM or International Manual of Diseases. But sensory processing disorder research, as well as autism research, are where you get a lot of the research on interoception, proprioception, vestibular, and all of these senses that are often ignored in general research. And proprioception and vestibular, as you can see there, is position and movement, air temperature, hot and cold, and then interoception, what's going on in your body. And those senses are very important, and many people with misophonia do have other sensory issues. However, whether or not this is a co-occurring phenomena or the same disorder is something that research is going to have to look into before we can give a definitive answer. So, what is the Misophonia Matters approach? The Misophonia Matters approach is my own personal approach, and it's not really a treatment or an intervention so much as me taking all I know about misophonia for myself and from my advocacy work and kind of just putting it all together and like translating the thoughts in my head to then give to other people, if that makes sense. So basically, the Misophonia Matters approach is multisensory based, and it has psychoeducation, sensory regulation, cognitive and psychological skills, which of course are all very important. Sensory regulation in the sense of ways to get our brains and our bodies together and calm down, like using essential oils so that these smells can make you feel calmer, or, cognitively trying to reconceptualize, why is this person the trigger? Am I mad at the person or am I mad at the sound? What would I do if I didn't have misophonia? And just trying to surround that misophonic moment and ensure that the time you're triggered and the distress there does not spill over into other areas of your life. But aside of all of this, the important part of the Misophonia Matters approach is a focus on advocacy and self advocacy. Because no matter what we do, at this point, there is no way to stop being triggered. So, my idea is that having an advocate approach in our own lives can be very helpful because negotiation surrounding misophonia can be very powerful, and each person that advocates for themselves then teaches somebody else who maybe someday will be kinder to another person. So, it's a lot about, asking for accommodations that can help you, pushing for those accommodations maybe when they're not given to you. And sometimes it's as simple as having a conversation, explaining misophonia in a way that is easy to digest for that person, printing out resources and giving it to them, showing them videos like these conferences, and really using education and advocacy as a way to cope, because then you've made these negotiations in your own life is better, but that kind of keeps going out because that person then will have heard of it and might be more susceptible to the next person they meet with the disorder. So I kind of touched on this in the last slide. I got ahead of myself, but why does advocacy matter? So in my opinion, advocacy matters because each thing we do as a person, these series of actions over time, even small, they add up. And I mean, everyone talks about how they want to change the world, but in fact, the world changes just day by day, person by person, living our lives, being kinder to each other, educating each other. And, advocacy can be a flashy campaign. It can be a TV commercial. It can be, a widespread campaign, but it can also be as simple as saying, "Hi, could you please stop whistling? I have this disorder and it causes fight flight and it's very distressing." And then maybe they'll ask you for more information and you give it to them. And hopefully that goes well. I'm very sorry if you try that and it doesn't. I have heard of situations where people are like, "Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Why do you want me to stop?" So I always emphasize trying not to explain misophonia when you're triggered because that person might see your body language and that you're upset, and they might then go into fight flight themselves. And two people in fight flight trying to have a negotiation usually doesn't go very well. So, this is a really important point I want to hit on about adaptation, not manipulation. It's mostly with children that I've heard people complain where they'll say, "Oh, they're lying to me about why they don't want to do something," or, a partner goes through great lengths to not go to date nights. So they'll be like, "Oh, sorry, I don't wanna go because I'm tired," when really they don't wanna be triggered, or someone might say that they are allergic to the smell of gum so that someone won't chew, even though the smell of gum also makes me sick. But the point is, when people think this is manipulation, I personally don't. I think it's an adaptation of a world that doesn't understand misophonia. So in our heads, sometimes we come up with like these little lies that we think are easier for that person to digest. So someone might not understand, I can't go to the movie theater because there's popcorn, but you could say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel like going to the movies because I have a migraine and my head hurts." That would be easier for some people to digest who don't understand misophonia. While I do hope we can get to a place where people are more comfortable of using misophonia and their triggers as a reason why not, because we deserve that. I also think it's important to not blame the sufferer if they're using this adaptive mechanism, because I don't think they're trying to manipulate you in the sense of, they're lying and they just want to control you. I think it's more a sense of self protection. So, on to the advocacy, I have a chart, and this is included in my workbook in my class for misophonia on reasonable versus unreasonable requests. So, one of the hardest parts of misophonia is, especially when, you have a family or you're in a couple or even work or school, what requests are reasonable and what aren't. And this is best if it's kind of agreed upon and both people are doing it at the same time. Like, it's not one person imposing you can or can't do this. The person with misophonia and the person without or persons can sit down together and write these down, maybe use a bulletin board, whatever you need to do. So, on the one side, for reasonable requests, I had things like, and by the way, these are my own with my own husband. So, this is reasonable requests. Close your door while playing video games. Eat chips in another room or with white noise playing. Have set times to watch movies versus eating. Unreasonable requests. Never play video games. Never eat chips. Never watch movies since one partner wants to eat throughout. So it's kind of about understanding the autonomy of both people while also respecting the disorder. And, at times you're going to run into things where this is hard. And I'm sorry about that, that is hard. But I think these negotiations are something that, whether or not you've written a chart, I think we've all done it. But I think it can be helpful if we are very cognizant of this and we are intentional when we are making these charts, because then instead of it becoming a fight, you can have that kind of written down and say, "Look, we've talked about this before. Could we please stick to that? And if we do want to change the arrangement, maybe, we can talk about that too." But I guess it's kind of just like de escalation. The misophonia exists, it's hard to live with, but we don't want that to take over the relationship entirely. So, this is an activity that I find very useful, and I am actually wearing a smartwatch right now. and that is what I use for it myself. My base heart rate when I am not asleep is usually 70 to 80. And apparently, right now it's at 100. I am, I guess, a bit alert. So, the point of this exercise is to see how quickly you calm down, but also to know what your base rate is. So, the point of knowing your baseline heart rate is to know what your heart rate should be. And for me, I use this to know my maximum tolerance. I already know that my maximum tolerance for misophonia is about 115 heart rate. That's where I'm at the point where it's like, okay, I'm going to shut down. I'm probably going to feel sick. I might end up with a migraine. And my baseline is 80. When it hits 100 to 110, maybe even 95, that's when I'm anxious. But my maximum's like 115, 120. When I hit 130 BPM, I know I'm done. Like I'm going to bed for the rest of the week. So, the point of this activity is to monitor your heart rate once per day per week while you're in a neutral state, just so that you kind of get your basic baseline. And then monitor it when you are anxious. And I know that's kind of hard, but when you're still able to stay in the room and just kind of look and be like, okay, my heart rate is 110 right now. I'm kind of really uncomfortable, but I can stay. And then kind of look at it when you can't stay anymore. And that would be like your absolute. So I find this personally useful because sometimes my brain isn't listening to my body. So if I'm wearing this watch and I feel kind of like groggy in the situation and I'm triggered, I can kind of look down at my watch and say, okay, can I get through this? And if it's like at 1:30, I can say to my husband, look, honey, I need a break, and I'll walk out. And I think it's okay to do that. And I think it's about understanding your own body and understanding your tolerance. And once you have a good baseline for your tolerance, you can then make negotiations based on that. So you can have, things that you can tolerate because you're only at your anxious rate for that. Like it's not comfortable, but you can handle it. But if something is a maximum tolerance activity, maybe you only do that for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or have more breaks. So, this is a version of breathing and an exercise that I personally find very helpful. And it's called triangle breathing or 478. There's a million different versions of this. I personally think this works better than four square breathing. I find four square breathing that you are not holding or exhaling long enough, and I find that that does not get the heart rate down enough. So, I actually personally use this all the time now. It used to be something that I barely used, but just as I go, I notice that now when I feel a little anxious or I feel like something is going to bother me, I start to do it. And I do personally think by doing the 478, it just kind of gives you more time to calm down. And it's also something that you can mentally think about. And this is something that's very good in the moment. Obviously, it's not going to take away the trigger completely, but it can help keep your heart rate from going higher and higher, which is helpful when triggered. And I also have this misophonia checklist. It's called Be Proactive. And it says, remember, paying attention to your physiological state before the moment can help you cope. So on the checklist, I have things like complete a sensory-based calming activity before entering the moment, such as yoga, stretching, a weighted blanket, have earplugs with you if you use them, make sure you have your headphones, white noise or sound generators. Excuse me, sorry. And if you are a parent, items you or your child find calming for the moment. And just the final thing on the list is obviously something that, you don't pack in a bag, but take with you the reassurance that even if things don't go perfectly, that it's going to be okay. And I know that can be hard to hear and it can be hard to kind of think through because when you're triggered, it really does feel like it won't be okay. But, you know, you will get through it, even if it is absolutely uncomfortable and terrible at the moment. And that doesn't make it easier necessarily, but it is a reminder that if you end up melting down or if you end up having to leave early, that's understandable in your situation. And I know that some people hate mantras, some people love them. For years, I was kind of like, I don't think a mantra can help misophonia until I started using my own. And I do feel like it's helpful in the moment. If nothing else, it keeps my brain, you know, focusing on something other than the trigger. So, my personal mantra is I'm safe. This is not forever. I will be okay. It's the sound or visual causing this. I will be okay when it's over. And that's just something I try to remind myself in that moment. And just I repeat it over and over and over. And I would say I think it helps. It doesn't make everything better, but it reminds me that, I've been triggered before, I'll be triggered again, but I can get through it. I can keep going. And it can help stop me from kind of like staring at the trigger or like over focusing. So I can instead be like, okay, I'm safe. This is not forever. I'll be okay. And then if you mix the mantra with triangle or four square breathing, I find that is even better. And, hopefully you can get out of that moment. That's always the best way to deal with it, is to just get out of the moment. But that's not always possible. So this is just kind of a little rundown of my book, class, workbook. I don't want to dwell on that too much. You can scan the QR code for more info or go to the link based on your PowerPoint that I sent. And it's basically the things we talked about today, but obviously much more extended because it's the full version. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me. And we actually just today released an introduction to misophonia for clinicians. And if you have taken a prior clinician class from us, you can email me and get this class for free if you've taken our other on-demand class. This is actually a mix of video and written content. It is taken from the book, but it's a bit different where there's also a case study involved. It's not like, you watch the video and it's just the transcript. The text is a bit different from the video. And clinicians that take this will get the Class 1 Fundamentals badge as a verified clinician. And it's just a way to show that the clinicians on our clinician list have at least some understanding of misophonia. And these are just ways to support the IMF, and there's the lifetime membership there. And then our donation campaign to get computers to help us do research. We do have some studies that are happening. And like I said in this video, we have that study that will compare sensory processing to misophonia, and I hope that we can get that out soon. And that is the end of my slideshow. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. So does anybody have any questions? You can put them in the Q&A or the chat. First question is, they mentioned that I sent the PowerPoint. How might I get that? So I did have it sent. It should have been in the email, but I can send that again. Can you just send me your email through the question, and I will email you that manually. And since this is a webinar, we do have the Q&A function that is a little bit different than just the chat. I'm not sure if the actual chat is open too, but I know that the Q&A is open if you'd like to ask questions. And I am just sending the PowerPoint to the person who asked. So I do want to say that the next video will be one of the pre-recorded ones, and that will be the Dr. Kumar one. There won't be any Q&A for the pre-recorded sessions because unfortunately those people were not able to attend live. But if you do have questions for these researchers, you can always, send them to me and I will relay them to the researchers, of course, because we are always about talking to researchers, talking to the community, ensuring that everybody has access to everybody. Because personally, I do believe that this is the best way to facilitate research. It should not be, a closed cavern where researchers kind of do their own thing and then every now and then talk to the community. I think it should be an ongoing kind of back and forth. So if there aren't questions, we could start the next presentation early. That is totally fine too. It's about an hour long of a video. All right, so I think we can start and watch the wonderful presentation on the brain basis of misophonia. And I am honestly very excited by Dr. Kumar's work. I remember when the research first came out, I had never heard of him, and I was like, oh my God, where did Dr. Kumar come from? This work is fantastic. Who is this man? Because at the time, like, I really felt like there wasn't enough research on the brain and on neuroscience. And suddenly there's this researcher and he's doing the most fantastic research I'd seen. And I'm just in awe. And I still am in awe to this day by his findings that are, ongoing. He's still researching. And honestly, in 2015, when I first wrote Full of Sound and Fury, there weren't a lot of citations because there weren't a lot of papers. And even to this day, I think there's only like 30 some papers that mention any form of treatment study. But that is a lot more than there were 10 years ago, like a lot more. So, if anything, I want to give you hope that this field seems to be just jumping forward at a very fast pace compared to other disorders. As noted on one of the slides, sensory processing disorder and sensory integration has been researched since the 1960s, and yet the research is very slow. It's very slow. But misophonia, which only, became discovered in 2001, we've already got research institutes and grants and major universities really looking into this. So I really want to hammer in that there's a lot of hope here because there is so much going on. And it's fantastic because, a lot of disorders unfortunately don't see this type of research. And I'm not quite sure why misophonia research has blown up the way it has in the past 10 years, but it's exciting. It's exciting to me because, you know, I have hope. I have hope that we will get better interventions and that more and more attention also will come to this disorder and our lives can just get better in the sense that people, if you say I have misophonia instead of saying, what are you talking about? They will instead say, oh, I've heard of that. And that might seem like a small difference, but hopefully that can lead to more accommodations for us. And hopefully it can lead to less pushback when we ask for accommodations, because I know that some people do have a lot of pushback when they ask for accommodations. And that is very unfortunate because we do deserve to have a good life and we do deserve to be able to, work in peace and enjoy ourselves. And I think it's important that we are able to be respected